again to my channel, and now I'm going to watch a video called Every Noble Phantasm from Fate Grand Order Babylonia Explained, so let's check it out.
I'm gonna be honest, even though Fate Grand Order Babylonia wasn't done by Ufotable, the animation definitely went above and beyond. But where they
Yeah, I agree
completely
with that
captivated
too.
my full attention was when any servant, goddess, grand assassin, or dick wizard was using their noble phantasms. These were such momentous feats that I couldn't help but be in awe at what I was watching every single time. They truly captured the essence of how impactful a noble phantasm should be. However, I think a greater level of appreciation for these noble phantasms could be had, especially when you take into account how these ultimate abilities tie into their characters' deeper lore. So let's go through each noble phantasm in the order they appeared in the anime and talk a little bit about what exactly that power was. And if you want to know the full extent of each servant's origins and powers, then feel free to check out my other servant profile videos as well. But now, let's begin.
I also think that the graphics of this anime was so cool,
Right from episode 0 and episode 1, we
and I
get
really
to see
love
Mash
the
use Lord Camelot,
background music
Castle of the
effects.
Distant Utopia. It's a noble phantasm that's originally possessed by the Knight of the Round Table, Galahad, the son of Lancelot. He wasn't the greatest fighter, but his defensive nature and tactician mentality were unrivaled. And it's his heroic spirit that's infused into Mash's body to make this shielder demi-servant. Lord Camelot is a noble phantasm that represents the very castle the Knights of the Round Table resided in. The shield itself is said to be made from the Round Table, and it's meant to provide the same form of protection that the towering walls of Camelot once did. What it does is generate a conceptual defensive barrier that scales in strength with proportion to the willpower of its user. This means that it's not a physical barrier with a fixed ceiling for how much damage it can take. It's a protection of the soul that doesn't register on the laws of physics. So long as Mash doesn't lose hope, Lord Camelot will not falter. So, given that there's no limit to the amount of defense it can produce, it's definitely one of the most powerful defensive noble phantasms, second probably only to Avalon. In episode 2, we see Enkidu use Age of Babylon, the wisdom of the people. It's interesting to note that without this noble phantasm, Gilgamesh's Gatling gun variant to his Gate of Babylon wouldn't even exist. You see, Age of Babylon allows Enkidu to create any type of weapon he wants from the earth. As a living weapon himself, one that was created by the gods, he has the ability to generate any tool or weapon he needs from the ground, each being a brand new original creation of the highest quality. So, when Gilgamesh first encountered this never-ending onslaught of weapons being projected at him, his only way to keep up was to do the same. He matched Enkidu's output of weapons by launching his own directly from the Gate of Babylon. At the time, the two were evenly matched, as Enkidu's Age of Babylon was perfectly equal to Gilgamesh's Gate. It was a power strong enough to keep Gilgamesh occupied in battle
So
for
Age
days,
of Babylon is
and no
equal
less
to Gate
against a
of
Gilgamesh that
Babylon.
was in his prime. If you want to know which one's stronger, then perhaps take a look towards Fate's Strange Fake. But while we're on the topic
I'm still
of
reading
Gilgamesh,
that novel,
the cast version
actually.
we see in Fate Grand Order uses a significantly weaker version of Gate of Babylon. Remember, since Gilgamesh distributed all his weapons except for magical staves to the people of Uruk, his Gate of Babylon has lost a lot of offensive power. Now, rather than bombarding his opponents with swords and spears, he instead opens the gate to cast a barrage of long-ranged spells. It's definitely not as strong as his archer version, but luckily he has another noble phantasm that we'll talk about later. Next up, from episode 8, is Ushiwakamaru's Shana O's Wandering
Oh,
Tales.
I
A
remember
special
this
type of
epic
noble
episode
phantasm that
when
consists of
Ushiwakamaru
5
was
different
fighting
secret
with
techniques
Gorgon.
depicted from her numerous legends. These legends all stem from defining moments in Ushiwakamaru's life as the renowned and fearsome military commander of the Genji clan. Unfortunately, we only got to see 2 of these techniques in action. The first was Asumidori, short steps with the heavenly blade. A single powerful slash with her Asumidori blade that is very difficult to dodge, reason being that the strike is preceded by an advanced martial arts technique known as Shikuchi, a technique that allows Ushiwakamaru to almost instantly close the distance between herself and her opponent. Her second feat was the jumping of the 8 ships at Dan no Uda. This refers back to the legendary sea battle of Dan no Uda in the year 1185. Ushiwakamaru was leading the entire Genji naval fleet against the rival Taira clan. So, what this noble phantasm embodies was the act of Ushiwakamaru leaping between ships during raging tides to best the enemy clan in hand-to-hand combat. It's this feat that enables her to not only jump higher, but also traverse any sort of terrain so long as there is a minimal foothold, making it look as if jumping between Gorgon's hair was child's play. Now, those were only Act 2 and Act 4 of her Wandering Tales. There's still 3 other techniques that provide more to Ushiwakamaru's kit. Act 1 is called Eye of Shiva, detecting the 6 secret teachings, an ability that instantly relocates every person within a specified area. It's highly useful for breaking enemy ranks and causing mass confusion on the battlefield. Act 3 is Benkei, Steadfast Position, a more defensive technique that creates an imitation of Benkei's body to block an incoming attack. The more faith Ushiwakamaru has in Benkei, the stronger this Benkei shield will be. And finally, Act 5 is Hoemaru, Spider Slayer. Imagine if Ushiwakamaru was part of the Hashira and she could use breathing techniques to make her blade super effective against demons. That's pretty much what this is, bringing us to the last technique of her Wandering Tales.
Yeah,
Now,
I
in
wonder
that
if
same
Ushiwakamaru
technique,
also
we
appear
then
in
get to see
Demon
Leonidas
Slayer
use the
anime.
Thermopylae and Emotia, Guardian of the Hot Gates. If you've ever seen the movie 300, then this noble
I know this
phantasm is
movie.
pretty much an embodiment of that event. It's a reenactment of the 300 Spartans led by Leonidas who defended against a Persian invasion force of 100,000. Just as it was in history, this noble phantasm is typically used as a counterattack. It initiates with the summoning of 300 Spartans, each possessing a mid-range endurance rank that's pretty decent for any servant. Their purpose is to defend Leonidas and his master from the enemy's attack. After holding that defense, Leonidas then launches a counterattack that scales in power with the number of Spartans left over. If you take into account what we saw in Babylonia, it's almost as if the counterattack looked as powerful as the defense itself. But at its core, this is a more defensive noble phantasm than anything else. The counterattack is just a nice little bit of damage on top. After all, we remember the Battle of Thermopylae not for his offensive turns on the Persian army, but rather his outstanding defense that resisted their consistent advances for 3 days straight. Next we have Quetzalcoatl's Quetzalcoatl, the Winged Serpent, a pterosaur from the Jurassic Age whose name derives from this Mesoamerican goddess. The pterosaur itself is the noble phantasm, except the ones that she summons aren't your everyday Quetzalcoatlists from the Cretaceous period. No, for someone as strong as Quetzalcoatl, she rides a significantly more powerful phantasmal version of them, divine beasts that have authority over lightning, winds, and rain, giving them the ability to manipulate these aspects of the world. In episode 13, we get to see Ereshkigal use a brand new noble phantasm, one that was unique to the anime, Namu Abzu Gugulana. Other than the context we were given in the anime, it's hard to interpret how this attack relates to Ereshkigal's actual myth. I mean, Gugulana was her husband once upon a time, but how that affects the impact of this powerful spear strike is yet to be revealed. Immediately after this fight, the Old Man of the Mountain appears and uses Azrael, the angel that announces death. Although it appears that the noble phantasm's effect is caused by the sword, that's actually not the case at all. The sword he wields has no name. It's nothing more than a common weapon that anyone could use. No, Azrael is the essence of the noble phantasm itself. It's the ability or technique to impose the concept of death onto literally anything. By applying Azrael to his sword, be it a person, primordial god, or even abstract concept like Ereshkigal's connection to the Three Goddess Alliance, he can impose death onto each of these things with a single cut. So basically he can kill literally anything. Not to mention that as someone who is quite literally the physical embodiment of death, anything he imposes death upon then has a low chance of instantly dying. That's pretty crazy, especially when you consider that Tiamat could have been one-shot when she gained the concept of death. Anyway, the name this noble phantasm takes after is the Angel of Death. Supposedly when God created death,
Also, that's the
Death
meaning
looked
of
at Azrael
Azrael.
and proceeded to submit to him. Because of
Angel
this,
of Death.
Azrael gained the authority to determine what shall live and what shall die. So it's a very fitting name for an ability possessed by someone who pretty much has that same responsibility. In episode 14 and 15, Anna reveals her possession of the mystic eyes Cybele, the same eyes possessed by her future self Medusa. The thing is, Medusa possesses these eyes as a skill, allowing her to use the petrification ability whenever she wants. However, due to being a younger version of Medusa, Anna hasn't gained these mystic eyes yet. She can only use them while calling her noble phantasm, Caress of the Medusa, Embrace of the Goddess. It's pretty straightforward, just a single target attack that turns the opponent to stone, typically opening up a window to strike that the opponent would not be able to defend. Skipping to episode 17, now that Tiamat has entered the stage, it's time for the goddesses to show their true power. First, we saw Ishtar use Angal Takigalshe, mountain range shaking firewood of Venus. It's a representation of the myth where Ishtar comes across a mountain whose natural beauty far surpasses her own. Being a goddess of beauty meant that this mountain's very existence was an affront on her own authority. Therefore, she thought that it shouldn't be allowed to exist. So she trampled over the entire mountain with an increasing amount of divine force.
I think Ishtar's noble Phantasm in the anime was so cool back then.
She
It's
caused
pretty
the
similar
entire
with the
range
noble
to
Phantasm in
collapse.
FGO game.
It's this act of annihilating an entire mountain that's replicated by this noble phantasm. First, Ishtar activates Mana's warp function to open up a portal to Venus as it was during the Age of the Gods. Then, using her authority as a goddess of Venus, she creates a copy of the entire planet, projects it into a form that's shootable from her bow, then fires it like an arrow towards her enemy, dealing an impact strong enough to shatter entire mountains. Shortly after this, Quetzalcoatl used both her noble phantasms in what's probably the best scene in the entire anime. First, she used Piedra del Sol, the Sunstone, the monolith we saw at the top of her temple in episode 11. During the era of the Aztecs, it was a megalith that allowed them to observe the past and the future. Now it serves as Quetzalcoatl's primary symbol of worship. Because of this, it's what provides her with a significant portion of her divinity and subsequent power. So, what this noble phantasm does is open up a gate that releases a portion of Quetzalcoatl's authority over the sun, allowing her to unleash these solar winds that scorch everything in their path, almost as if she was using the sun itself to burn the entire landscape. It's an ability so strong that not only did it burn away a majority of Tiamat's mud, but it also turned the ground into molten lava. It's even been said to have enough literal firepower to vaporize Uruk in its entirety. But it's Piedra del Sol that sets the stage for the variant of her much stronger second noble phantasm, the one that imitates the impact of the meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs, Zayaquatl, flame, burn even gods to ashes. In mythology, it's meant to symbolize her own temple in flames, the one that she willingly burned to the ground in order to prevent a rival god from gaining the treasures inside. Normally, this is translated into an ability that envelops the opponent with fire then prevents them from using their noble phantasm. However, due to her passion for lucha libre, she modified it to tie more into her origins as a goddess on Earth. When not fighting Tiamat, the regular Zayaquatl would be a devastating piledriver or dropkick from thousands of meters in the air. A dropkick that we now know as But when that's combined with the power output from Piedra del Sol, the dropkick becomes enhanced to the point where it would have an effect similar to a mass extinction level meteorite. She leaps into space, then falls into a dropkick that replicates the power of the meteorite that wiped out the dinosaurs, the same meteorite that brought this goddess to our planet millions of years ago. In the next episode, Gorgon used Pandemonium Ketis, Forced Seal Pandemonic Temple.
Oh, okay,
This
I
is a
remember
rather
this.
terrifying noble phantasm,
When
because by
Gorgon
calling
or
its
Anna
true name,
was
Medusa gives
saving
up the part of
Ritsuga
her
and
that's a
Mesh.
goddess. She essentially accepts the fact that she's the monster that everyone in Greek mythology made her out to be, and by doing so, she truly becomes the Gorgon, the fully metamorphosized version of Medusa that devoured her own sisters. Medusa typically tries to deny this fact with all her heart. She tries her best to cling to the only part of her that wasn't monstrous, her divinity. That's why she would become so enraged whenever Anna or Leonidas would call her Gorgon. It's also why she hates to use this noble phantasm. Doing so would be the same thing as accepting her true form. And that was something she wanted to avoid at all costs. But when she does finally come to terms with what she really is, well, that's when we can see Medusa at her strongest. By turning into the true Gorgon with Pandemonium Ketis, everything around her becomes petrified and all organic life becomes liquefied. Anything turned to stone has zero normal means of returning back to normal. So anything short of a servant caught within this noble phantasm's area of attack
I think
likely
this
gets
is one
turned
of
into
the
a
most
puddle of blood and
deadliest
bones
noble
or becomes a
phantasm.
statue for the rest of eternity. Shortly after this, Gilgamesh uses the noble phantasm that's unique to his caster form, Malamudingir, King's Signal Cannon. Remember, Gil gave his collection of weapons to the people of Uruk, each of which were intended to be launched from the dingirs mounted along the walls of the city. But when King's Signal Cannon is called, Gilgamesh gains control of all 360 dingirs, proceeding to fire them simultaneously to launch a concentrated barrage of what's essentially the collective power of mankind. Literally every weapon from Gilgamesh's treasury is launched at the target, and given what we saw in the anime, that's pretty much exactly what happened. So it's a very straightforward noble phantasm. What may have been a bit more confusing was when Enkidu turned his own body into the chains of heaven to fight Tiamat. This was Enkidu's second noble phantasm, Enuma Elish, "O humans, let us restrain the gods." As an existence created for the sole purpose of keeping Gilgamesh bound to the heavens, Enuma Elish was the ultimate attack to do just that. But after becoming Gilgamesh's friend, he instead chose to use this power for the sake of humanity. So what happens is, Enkidu uses a significant amount of energy from the world to transform his own body into a divine construct that the world can recognize. In this case, it was the Chains of Heaven. Then, just like how he does with Age of Babylon, he launches himself at the target for a large-scale piercing attack. What's unique about this noble phantasm though is that the source of its power comes directly from the counterforce. What this means is that the more of a threat to humanity the opponent is, the stronger Enkidu's attack will be. It's a noble phantasm that's meant to preserve the integrity of the world and its people. In episode 20, Ereshkigal uses her noble phantasm to create an attack that replicates the same feat of Ishtar destroying the mountain, Kur-Kigal Urkala, the bellows of Kur that tramples upon Iker. It's essentially the same noble phantasm as Ishtar's, but rather than the attack being shot from the heavens to the earth below, it's instead an attack from the underworld to the ground above. Ereshkigal is able to materialize a shrine given to her by her husband, a god who was known to rule the underworld at her side. By summoning this shrine, Ereshkigal pretty much brings the underworld to her, granting her all the authorities she would normally have while in the underworld, even when not being in the underworld. The attack itself certainly isn't as strong as Ishtar's, but it does open up the field for Ereshkigal to become more useful. Now, I was hoping that Merlin using
Garden of Avalon!
context on what this noble phantasm actually does, but unfortunately we didn't get too much info. As I'm sure you know, Merlin is usually trapped within the eternal utopia of Avalon, a place within no person can die and no evil can exist. It's a perfectly pure land, free from the decay and destruction of the natural world. When Merlin calls this noble phantasm, the area around the tower called the Garden of Avalon is replicated. He pretty much summons portions of Avalon to the immediate area. Now, what I assume happens after is that because Merlin has materialized Avalon itself, the blessings that come from being within Avalon's domain are applied as well. Anyone within these summoned areas could very well be immune to curses or even death, making it a very useful defensive ability. Though the full extent of this noble phantasm remains a mystery, which honestly is something we've already come to expect from Merlin. Finally, we get to what could very well be the strongest noble phantasm in the entire
Enuma Elish!
which produces the devastating attack Enuma Elish. Now, Ea isn't something that can be so easily explained in a few lines. I can spend an entire video discussing its complex nature and origins. I suppose the important aspect to know is that Ea is this primordial sword that can create winds that tear the very fabric of space. They're described as compressed and intertwined layers of wind that turn into gaps between space and time. These result in an undefendable attack that tends to destroy everything in its path. Anywhere the winds cut, a void of nothingness will open up and begin to swallow up the surrounding area. It's an attack that attempts to replicate the very instance of creation, Genesis. Of course, there's definitely more to it than just that. But as I said earlier, if you want to know more, I have all these full servant profile videos that go much more in depth with their lore and abilities. The most recent one was on Ishtar, so feel free to check that one out and any of the others through the links in the description.
Okay guys, so that's the end of this video, which is every noble phantasm from Fate Grand Order Babylonia explained by Eddie News, and I think it's a very great and informative video about the noble phantasms in the anime. And I agree with the creators of this video that even though this anime wasn't made by Ufotable, but all of the noble phantasm looks amazing, and I really love the background sound effects because it sounds so epic. And for my opinion, I think the most useful noble phantasm is King Hassan's noble phantasm because it can give the concept of death to anything, even for Tiamat. And also after watching this video, I just know that Gorgon hates to use Pandemonium Cactus. It reminds me of Flattery in Apocrypha because he hates to use his noble phantasm too. But at least in the anime, Gorgon did a very great job to use her noble phantasm eventually to save Ritsuka Fujimaru and also Mash from Tiamat. And also I think Ishtar's noble phantasm in this anime was well animated. It's pretty similar to her noble phantasm in FGO game, and I think it looks so beautiful too when she was opening the sky and then she makes a copy of the planet and then shoot the planet to Tiamat. But it's too bad that Tiamat is too strong that she cannot be killed with Eastern Noble Phantasm. That's why we need Azrael in the underworld. So thanks for the one who shared the link of the video in the comment section. I really appreciate it. It's a very informative video about the noble phantasms in Fate Grand Order Babylonia. And as usual, if you guys have another video that you want me to react to, just put in the comment section. So thank you guys for watching our video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. See you again on my next video and take care.